The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a soft hiss. Ambassador Kethvar walked into the room with heavy steps. His 4 arms carried data tablets filled with intelligence reports that would make any council member lose sleep. The weekly briefing had become a routine over the past 300 years, but today felt different. Around the circular chamber, representatives from dozens of alien species sat in their designated seats. The Vorthak, with their blue-scaled skin, the ethereal Zentari floating in their energy bubbles, and the insectoid hegemony delegates clicking their mandibles in nervous patterns. All of them shared the same expression of growing unease. Kethvar placed his tablets on the central podium and activated the holographic display. Images of star systems appeared in the air above the assembled delegates. Red markers indicated human presence. 3 centuries ago, there had been only one red dot marking Earth. Now, the display showed thousands of red points scattered across the outer rim of the galaxy. "Honored council members," Kethvar began, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Our surveillance networks have detected increased human activity in sectors we previously considered empty space. The exiled species continues to expand at an alarming rate." Councillor Vextai of the hegemony leaned forward, his compound eyes reflecting the holographic stars. "Impossible. We confined them to the outer rim. There are no habitable worlds in those regions." "That is what we believed," Kethvar replied. "However, humans appear to have developed technologies we did not anticipate. They are creating habitable environments where none existed before. Asteroid colonies, terraformed moons, even space stations the size of small planets." The chamber fell silent except for the soft humming of environmental systems. 300 years ago, the Council had made what they considered a merciful decision. Instead of destroying humanity for their aggressive nature, they had simply banished them from civilized space. The humans had been given 1 week to gather their belongings and leave Earth forever. Meanwhile, millions of light years away, Commander Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the reconnaissance ship, New Horizon. Before him stretched the blue and white marble of Earth, the birth world his people had been forced to abandon. Jake had never set foot on that world, but the stories lived in his blood. His grandmother, Katie Sullivan, had been among the last humans to escape during the Great Exodus. She used to tell him about the green forests and blue oceans, about cities that reached toward the sky and the smell of rain on fresh earth. Katie had died on the colony world of Haven's Gate, but not before, passing down every detail of the world they had lost. Jake pressed his hand against the cold metal of the viewing port. Earth looked peaceful from this distance. The Council had declared it a protected world after the human exodus, allowing it to heal from centuries of industrial damage. Now it was a nature preserve, maintained by automated systems and visited only by Council research teams. "Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from Fleet Command," called Lieutenant Ben Parker from the communications station. Jake turned away from Earth and walked to his command chair. "Put it through." The holographic image of Admiral Susan Wright appeared in the center of the bridge. Her weathered face showed the strain of commanding humanity's scattered fleets across dozens of galaxies. "Jake, I need you to return to New Terra immediately. We've received intelligence that changes everything." "What kind of intelligence, Admiral?" "The kind that means our exile is about to end, one way or another." Dr. Elena Rodriguez sat in her laboratory aboard the research station Galileo, reviewing data that had taken her 20 years to compile. As humanity's chief xenobiologist and population analyst, she had spent her career studying how humans had adapted to life in exile. The results of her research would shock even her own people. When the Galactic Council had banished humanity, they had expected the species to gradually decline and disappear. Humans were considered too dependent on their homeworld to survive in the harsh environments of the Outer Rim. The Council had been spectacularly wrong. Elena's data showed that humanity's population had not only survived, but had grown from 8 billion to nearly 2 trillion individuals. They had established permanent settlements on over 1 million worlds, moons, and artificial habitats. More importantly, they had developed technologies that made them nearly independent of traditional planetary resources. The key to human survival had been their ability to adapt and innovate. While other species required specific atmospheric conditions and gravity levels, humans had learned to modify themselves and their environments. They built cities inside asteroids, created artificial gravity systems, and developed life support technologies that could sustain populations for generations without external resources. Elena's research also revealed something the Council would find even more disturbing. Humanity had not expanded alone. They had encountered dozens of alien species in the Outer Rim, beings that the Galactic Council had never discovered. Unlike the Council's approach of conquest and subjugation, humans had formed partnerships and alliances with these species. The irony was not lost on Elena. The Council had exiled humanity for being too aggressive, too unpredictable, too dangerous to remain among civilized species. In response, humans had built a civilization based on cooperation and mutual support that spanned multiple galaxies. She closed her research files and prepared to transmit her findings to the fleet commanders. The Council had wanted to contain humanity by casting them out. Instead, they had created exactly what they feared most: a human civilization with the resources and alliances to challenge the established galactic order. The exile that was meant to protect the galaxy from humanity had instead given humanity 3 centuries to become something far more powerful than they had ever been before. Soon, the Council would learn the true cost of their decision. Captain Lisa Chen felt the familiar sensation of hyperspace transition as her exploration vessel Pathfinder emerged near the Andromeda Gateway. The massive structure hung in space like a giant metal flower, its petals opening to welcome ships from across the galaxy. This was neutral territory, controlled by the Zephyrian Collective, and Lisa's mission was to establish formal diplomatic contact. The Zephyrians had remained neutral in galactic politics for over 1,000 years. They controlled several key trade routes and possessed advanced technology that even the Galactic Council respected. If humanity could form an alliance with them, it would significantly change the balance of power in their favor. "Captain, we're receiving a docking assignment," reported Communications Officer Amy Rodriguez from her station. "Base 7, Level 12. As the Pathfinder approached the designated docking bay, Lisa noticed something unexpected. Several of the ships in nearby bays bore human markings, not just 1 or 2 vessels, but dozens of them. This was supposed to be first contact between humanity and the Zephyrian Collective, yet humans were clearly already present here. The docking clamps engaged with a soft thud, and Lisa prepared to meet her diplomatic contact. She had expected to face alien representatives who knew nothing about humanity. Instead, the airlock opened to reveal a familiar human face. "Welcome to Andromeda Station, Captain Chen," said the man, extending his hand in greeting. "I'm Colony, Administrator Ben Parker, representative of Haven 7th. Lisa stared at him in confusion. "Colony Administrator? I thought this was first contact." Ben smiled and gestured for her to follow him into the station. "That's what your people back in the Inner Territories thought. Out here, humans have been working with the Zephyrians for over 50 years. Haven 7th is just one of hundreds of human colonies in this sector." As they walked through the station corridors, Lisa saw the evidence of Ben's words everywhere. Humans worked alongside tall, graceful Zephyrians with their translucent blue skin and flowing robes. Other species she didn't recognize operated shops and restaurants. The diversity was staggering. "How many human colonies are there in Zephyrian space?" Lisa asked. "In this sector alone?" "About 400. The Zephyrians welcomed us when we first arrived here about 60 years ago. They were fascinated by human adaptability and our approach to problem solving. Unlike most species, humans don't insist that everyone else adapt to our way of doing things. Ben led her to an observation deck that looked out over Haven 7th's surface. The planet below was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Human-designed cities integrated seamlessly with Zephyrian crystal structures and the organic architecture of 3 other species Lisa couldn't identify. The secret to human success out here, Ben explained, has been our willingness to learn and adapt. When we meet a new species, we don't try to conquer them or force them to join some empire. We ask what they need and figure out how we can help each other. Meanwhile, in the Titan shipyards orbiting New Pittsburgh, engineer Marcus Thompson watched as another Titan-class dreadnought took shape. The massive vessel stretched for kilometers, its hull incorporating design elements from dozens of different species. Human engineering provided the framework, but Zephyrian energy systems powered the ship, Altarian defensive screens protected it, and Tau Satan weapons gave it teeth. Marcus had been working on the Titan project for 5 years, since Admiral Wright had approved the construction of humanity's new battle fleet. Each ship represented not just human technological advancement, but the combined knowledge of all their allies in the Outer Rim. "How many ships are currently under construction?" asked his assistant, engineer Patricia Moore. 12 Titan-class dreadnoughts, 48 Nova-class cruisers, and over 200 smaller vessels, Marcus replied. "But those are just the human ships. Our allies are building their own fleets using shared technology. The Zephyrians alone have 30 capital ships under construction," Patricia whistled softly. "The Council has no idea what's coming, do they?" "Not even close. They still think we're refugees struggling to survive on a few barren worlds. They have no concept of what we've built out here." The shipyard stretched as far as the eye could. Sea in all directions. Thousands of workers from dozens of species labored together, building not just ships but the infrastructure of a new kind of civilization. This was just one of dozens of similar facilities scattered across human space. Admiral Susan Wright stood on the command deck of the flagship Defiance, reviewing the latest reports from across human territory. The numbers were almost impossible to believe, even for someone who had watched humanity's expansion firsthand. 1,200,000 inhabited worlds, she read aloud to her staff. Population approaching 2 trillion. Fleet strength at 75% of projected capacity. Her aide, Commander Ryan Mitchell, shook his head in amazement. "When the Council exiled us, Earth's population was 8 billion. Now we have more people living in space stations than ever lived on our home world." "The irony is perfect," Wright replied. "They cast us out because they thought we were too aggressive, too expansionist. So we went out and became exactly what they feared, but not in the way they expected." The main display showed a 3-dimensional map of human space. Red dots marked human colonies, blue indicated allied settlements, and green showed joint operations. The pattern was clear. Humanity had not expanded through conquest, but through cooperation and mutual benefit. "Admiral, what's our next move?" asked Commander Mitchell. Wright studied the display for a long moment. "We wait. The Council will make a move eventually. When they attacked Kepler's Hope, they showed their true nature. They'll do it again, and when they do, we'll be ready." The truth was that humanity no longer needed to seek revenge against the Council. Their exile had forced them to become something greater than they had ever been. The scattered refugee fleets of 3 centuries ago had evolved into a galactic superpower built on principles the old Council could never understand. The million worlds at humanity's back were not conquered territories or subjugated populations. They were partners and allies who had chosen to stand with humanity because humans had proven themselves worthy of trust. That was a kind of power that no amount of military force could match. The exile was ending, but not because humanity was returning as refugees seeking mercy. They were returning as the architects of a new galactic order. President Alex Turner of the United Human Colonies sat in his office on New Terra, staring at the encrypted message that had just arrived from the border systems. The words seemed to burn themselves into his mind as he read them again and again, hoping somehow they would change. Kepler's hope was gone. The neutral colony world had been home to nearly 50,000 humans and their alien neighbors. It had been a shining example of the cooperative civilization humanity had built in exile, where 5 different species worked together to terraform a marginal world into something beautiful. The hegemony fleet had arrived without warning. They had ignored all attempts at communication, destroyed the orbital defenses, and systematically bombarded every settlement on the planet's surface. When rescue ships arrived 3 days later, they found only smoking ruins and mass graves. Alex activated his secure communication system and called an emergency meeting of the Colonial Council. Within minutes, the holographic images of governors, admirals, and ambassadors began appearing around his conference table. "You've all seen the reports from Kepler's Hope," Alex began without preamble. "This was not a random attack. Intelligence suggests the hegemony was acting on direct orders from the Galactic Council. They wanted to send us a message." Governor Elena Rodriguez of Haven's Gate leaned forward in her chair. "What kind of message requires the murder of 50,000 innocent civilians?" "The kind that tells us we should remember our place," replied Admiral Susan Wright grimly. "The Council has been watching our expansion. They're trying to intimidate us back into hiding." Alex stood and walked to the window overlooking New Terra's capital city. Below him, humans and aliens moved through the streets together, going about their daily lives in the kind of harmony the old council claimed was impossible. The sight strengthened his resolve. The council made a mistake 300 years ago. "When they exiled us instead of trying to destroy us completely," he said. "Now they've made an even bigger mistake. They've shown us that they haven't changed at all." Fleet Admiral Chris Davis materialized in his seat. His image transmitted from Fort Liberty, humanity's primary military installation. "Mr. President, Operation Homecoming is ready to launch on your order. We have over 3,000 ships positioned across 17 sectors, with allied fleets standing by." "How many allies have confirmed their support?" asked Alex. "All of them," Chris replied without hesitation. "The Zephyrian Collective has declared the attack on Kepler's Hope an act of aggression against all peaceful species. The Altarian Republic is mobilizing their entire fleet. Even the normally neutral Tau Satan free worlds have offered military support." Ambassador Carl Johnson appeared in his chair, connecting from the diplomatic station at Alpha Centauri. "Mr. President, I've been in contact with resistance movements inside Council space. Not all of their member species support the hardline policies of the current leadership. Several are willing to provide intelligence and safe passage for our forces." Alex returned to his seat and looked around the table at the faces of humanity's leaders. These were people who had been born and raised in exile, who had never seen Earth except in historical records. Yet they carried the same determination that had allowed humanity to survive and thrive in the depths of space. "The Council wants to remind us that we're exiles," Alex said quietly. "I think it's time we reminded them what exiles can become when they're pushed too far." On the world of Zentari Prime, Security Chief Veltar frantically reviewed intelligence reports that made no sense according to everything the Council believed about humanity. His multiple eyes darted between data screens showing fleet movements, population estimates, and technological assessments that contradicted 3 centuries of assumptions. "This cannot be accurate," he muttered to his aide, a younger Zentari, named Kexlon. "These numbers suggest human military strength exceeds our own by a factor of 10. Kexlon manipulated the holographic display, highlighting the most disturbing data points. "Sir, our deep space sensors have detected massive fleet formations moving toward the inner galaxy. These are not the refugee ships we remember. They're using technology we don't recognize." Veltar activated the emergency communication system and sent an urgent message to the council chambers. Within the hour, he was standing before the assembled representatives trying to explain the impossible. "Honored council members," he began, his voice shaking slightly. "Our intelligence indicates that humanity has not merely survived their exile. They have built a civilization that spans multiple galaxies and includes hundreds of allied species we have never encountered." Councillor Vextai of the Hegemony clicked his mandibles dismissively. "Impossible. We confined them to empty space. There are no resources in the Outer Rim to support such expansion." "That is what we believed," Veltar replied. "However, it appears that humans have developed technologies that allow them to create resources where none existed. They have transformed asteroids into cities, built artificial worlds, and established trade networks that connect distant galaxies." The chamber erupted in confused chatter as representatives demanded explanations that Veltar could not provide. How had the Council's surveillance networks missed such massive expansion? How had humanity developed such advanced technology in only 3 centuries? Dr. Patricia Moore, head of the Human Intelligence Division, watched the chaos in the Council. Chambers through hidden surveillance networks her agents had been building for decades. Every word spoken in the supposedly secure chamber was transmitted directly to human command centers across the galaxy. Patricia smiled as she prepared her final report for Admiral Wright. The Council was exactly where humanity needed them to be: confused, divided, and completely unprepared for what was coming. Her spy networks stretched throughout Council space, built patiently over generations by humans who had chosen to remain behind during the Exodus. They had lived as slaves, servants, and second-class citizens, but they had never stopped being human. Now their sacrifice would help free their people forever. The first skirmishes had already begun at the border systems. Human patrol fleets were encountering Council picket ships, and the results were exactly what Patricia had predicted. 3 centuries of technological advancement had given humanity an overwhelming advantage in every engagement. But this was about more than military superiority. This was about showing the galaxy that the old order was ending and a new one was beginning. The species that had once cast out humanity for being too dangerous were about to learn just how dangerous exiled humans could become when they had 1,000,000 worlds at their back. General Ryan Mitchell stood in the command center on New Terra, watching as dozens of holographic displays showed the progress of human forces across 3 sectors of Council space. What had begun as a response to the massacre at Kepler's Hope had evolved into something much larger: the systematic dismantling of the old galactic order. "Sir, the Hegemony's 3rd Fleet has been eliminated," reported Communications Officer Lisa Chen. "Admiral Davis reports 0 human casualties. The enemy ships were completely outmatched." Ryan nodded grimly. The battles were almost embarrassingly one-sided. 300 years of technological advancement had given humanity weapons and defenses that the Council couldn't even comprehend, let alone counter. But this wasn't really about military superiority. This was about justice. "What's the status of the liberation operations?" Ryan asked. "Planetary Defense Commander Laura Thompson reports that Vorthak Prime's detention facilities have been secured," Lisa replied. "They're finding human prisoners who have been held there for decades." Ryan's jaw tightened. The Council had claimed that all humans had been safely evacuated during the exile. The discovery of secret prison camps told a different story. Humans had been taken during the original Exodus, sold into slavery or used for illegal experiments by Council species who saw them as disposable. On Vorthak Prime, Laura Thompson walked through the underground detention center that had been hidden beneath the planet's main city. The conditions were horrific: cramped cells, poor sanitation, and evidence of medical experimentation that violated every civilized standard. "How many prisoners have we found?" she asked her aide, Sergeant Ben. "Parker, 47 humans in this facility alone," Ben replied, his voice tight with anger. The oldest has been here for over 60 years. Some of them don't even remember Earth. Laura knelt beside an elderly man who was too weak to stand. His hair was white and his hands shook, but his eyes still held the spark of defiance that marked him as human. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Jake Morrison," the old man whispered. "Lieutenant Jake Morrison, Earth Defense Force, service number 77492. Laura's throat tightened. This man had been a soldier during the original exile, captured and imprisoned while his people fled to the stars. He had spent his entire adult life in this cell, never knowing that humanity had not only survived but thrived. "Lieutenant Morrison," she said, helping him to his feet. "I'm Commander Laura Thompson, United Human Colonial Forces. You're free, now, and you're going home." The old soldier's eyes filled with tears. "Home? Is Earth still ours?" "No, sir," Laura replied with a smile. "Earth was just the beginning. We have 1,000,000 worlds now, and every one of them is home." Meanwhile, in the emergency session of the Galactic Council, diplomatic envoy Carl Johnson stood before the assembled representatives to deliver humanity's terms. The chamber was half empty. Many species had already withdrawn from the council or declared neutrality as human forces advanced through their territory. "Honored council members," Carl began, his voice echoing in the vast chamber, "I come before you not as a supplicant seeking mercy, but as the representative of a civilization that has grown beyond your ability to contain or control." Councillor Vextai of the Hegemony rose from his seat, his mandibles clicking in agitation. "You dare to make demands of this council? You are exiles, refugees who should be grateful we allowed you to live at all." Carl smiled coldly. "Councillor, your people just murdered 50,000 civilians on Kepler's Hope. The only reason you're still alive to make speeches is because we choose to show more mercy than you ever did." The truth of his words hung in the air like a physical presence. Everyone in the chamber knew that human forces could reach Zentari Prime within days if they chose to. The only thing stopping them was their own restraint. "What do you want?" asked Ambassador Kethvar quietly. "Justice," Carl replied. "The old system is ending. The galaxy will no longer be ruled by a handful of species who treat others as subjects, to be controlled. Every sentient species will have a voice in their own fate." "And if we refuse?" Vexatai demanded. Carl's expression didn't change. "Then you'll discover what 300 years of exile has taught humanity about survival." Fleet Captain Monica Davis led her mixed-species task force toward the Hegemony core worlds, where the orders for the Kepler's Hope massacre had originated. Her fleet included not just human vessels, but ships from the Zephyrian Collective, the Altarian Republic, and a dozen other allied species. "Captain, we're detecting massive defensive formations around Hegemony Prime," reported her tactical officer, Commander Marcus Thompson. "Show me," Monica ordered. The main display revealed hundreds of Hegemony warships arranged in defensive screens around their homeworld. It was an impressive sight, representing the military might of one of the Council's most aggressive species. "Weapons range in 30 seconds, Marcus announced. "Signal the fleet," Monica commanded. "All ships, engage at will." The battle was over in less than an hour. The combined human-alien fleet tore through the Hegemony defenses like they were made of paper. Advanced energy weapons, quantum torpedo systems, and defensive screens that could absorb entire barrages made the human ships virtually invulnerable, while their enemies' weapons proved almost useless. But it wasn't just superior technology that won the battle. It was coordination, tactics, and the kind of multi-species cooperation that the old council had never been able to achieve. Human strategic thinking, combined with alien innovations, created a military force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. As the last Hegemony ships surrendered, Monica opened a communication channel to the planet below. "This is Fleet Captain Monica Davis of the United Human Colonial Forces," she announced. "The Hegemony government is hereby ordered to surrender. All personnel responsible for the attack on Kepler's Hope. You have 24 hours to comply. The response came within 6 hours. The hegemony leadership, faced with the complete destruction of their fleet and the certainty of orbital bombardment, agreed to turn over everyone involved in the massacre. Back on New Terra, President Alex Turner received reports from across the war zone. Human forces were winning everywhere, but more importantly, Council member species were abandoning their old alliance in droves. Some declared neutrality, others actively joined the human coalition, and a few simply surrendered without fighting. "Mr. President," reported Admiral Susan Wright via secure communication, "intelligence indicates that 17 Council species have withdrawn from the alliance in the past week. Only the core founding species are still actively resisting." Alex nodded. This was exactly what he had hoped for. The Council had been held together by fear and tradition, not genuine cooperation. When faced with a real challenge, it was falling apart. "What about our casualties?" he asked. "Minimal, sir. Our technological advantage is so overwhelming that most engagements end before the enemy can mount effective resistance. The bigger challenge is managing all the prisoners and refugees we're liberating." Alex walked to his office window and looked out over New Terra's capital. In the distance, he could see the construction sites where new habitats were being built to house the humans being freed from Council prisons. After 3 centuries, his people were finally going home. Not to Earth, though that world would always hold a special place in human hearts. They were going home to a galaxy where humans and their allies could live free from the fear of exile or persecution. The tables had turned completely. The species that had once cast out humanity now begged for mercy from the civilization they had tried to destroy. 2 years after the first human ships had returned to the inner galaxy, Ambassador Peter Walsh stood in what had once been the Galactic Council chambers on Zentari Prime. The building had been completely rebuilt and renamed Unity Station, reflecting the new reality of galactic governance. The circular chamber still held representatives from across the galaxy, but everything else had changed. Where once a handful of species had ruled over hundreds of others, now every sentient species had an equal voice in the Galactic Assembly. The old system of domination and subjugation had been replaced by cooperation and mutual respect. Peter watched as Ambassador Kethvar of the reformed Vorthak Republic addressed the Assembly. The Vorthak had been among the first to abandon the old council and seek alliance with humanity. Their transformation from aggressive militarists to peaceful traders had been remarkable. "The trade agreement between the Vorthak Republic and the Tau Ceton Free Worlds will benefit both our peoples," Kethvar was saying. "The new economic framework allows for resource sharing without exploitation or dependency." Peter smiled at the irony. The Vorthak had once been among humanity's most vocal opponents during the exile. Now they were enthusiastic supporters of the human model of cooperative governance. It was amazing how quickly attitudes could change when survival was at stake. The session was interrupted by the arrival of a priority message from Earth. Peter activated his personal communicator and received the transmission from Chief Engineer Amy Rodriguez, who was overseeing the memorial construction project. "Ambassador Walsh, the Earth Memorial is ready for the dedication ceremony," Amy reported. "President Carter and the Colonial Council have approved the final design." Peter nodded. The memorial had been a contentious project, with many humans arguing that Earth no longer mattered to their civilization. But President Elizabeth Carter had insisted that their birth world deserved to be honored, not as a symbol of loss, but as the starting point of humanity's greatest journey. On Earth's surface, Amy stood before the completed memorial in what had once been New York Harbor. The structure was elegant in its simplicity, a spiral of metal and crystal that reached toward the sky, inscribed with the names of every human who had died during the exile and every world that humanity had settled in the centuries since. The memorial served a dual purpose. It honored the past while looking toward the future. At its base, construction crews were building the first permanent human settlement on Earth in over 3 centuries, not because humans needed to return to their birth world, but because they chose to reclaim it as part of their heritage. Amy activated her communicator and connected to President Carter's office on New Terra. Madam President, the memorial is complete. The dedication ceremony can proceed as scheduled. President Elizabeth Carter appeared on the screen, her image transmitted across the millions of light-years between Earth and humanity's new capital. Excellent work, Amy. This memorial represents more than just our history. It represents our promise that no species will ever again be exiled from their home simply for being different. Carter had been elected on a platform of galactic reform, promising to use humanity's newfound power not for revenge, but for the creation of a better system for all species. Her administration had worked tirelessly to establish the new Galactic Assembly and ensure that the mistakes of the old Council were never repeated. Meanwhile, in the Outer Rim territories that had been humanity's refuge during the exile, former exile Dr. Elena Rodriguez continued her research into galactic biodiversity. Her work had taken on new importance as the Assembly tried to catalog and protect the hundreds of species that the old Council had never even known existed. We've discovered 47 new sentient species in this sector alone, Elena reported to the Assembly's Science Committee via holographic transmission. Each one has unique technologies and perspectives that could benefit the entire galactic community. The old Council had been obsessed with control and uniformity. They had wanted every species to fit into predefined categories and serve specific roles in their rigid hierarchy. The new assembly celebrated diversity, recognizing that the galaxy's strength came from the unique contributions of all its inhabitants. Elena's research had also revealed the true scope of what humanity had accomplished during their exile. The million worlds that supported human civilization were just the beginning. Humans had helped dozens of other species establish their own colonies, shared technology freely, and created trade networks that spanned multiple galaxies. In the military sector, Admiral Susan Wright was overseeing the transformation of humanity's vast fleet from a weapon of war into a force for peace and exploration. The ships that had crushed Council resistance were now being used to patrol trade routes, rescue ships in distress, and explore uncharted regions of space. Admiral, we've received another request for assistance, reported Captain Lisa Chen from the bridge of the exploration vessel Pathfinder. A colony ship from the Delphian Collective has suffered engine failure near the Veil Nebula. Dispatch the nearest rescue ships immediately, Wright ordered, and send a technical team to help them repair their engines. This was the new reality of galactic civilization. Instead of competing for resources or fighting over territory, species worked together to solve common problems. The human model of cooperation had proven so successful that even former enemies were eager to adopt it. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. Some species had struggled to adapt to the new system, particularly those that had benefited from the old Council's hierarchical structure. But gradually, even the most reluctant had come to see the advantages of cooperation over domination. The former hegemony worlds were perhaps the best example of this transformation. Once the most aggressive members of the old Council, they had become leaders in the Assembly's peacekeeping efforts. Their military expertise, combined with human strategic thinking and alien technology, had created the most effective peacekeeping force in galactic history. President Carter stood in her office on New Terra, looking out at a city that embodied everything humanity had learned during their exile. Humans and aliens worked side by side in every profession. Children of dozens of species played together in the parks, and the technology that kept it all running was a fusion of innovations from across the galaxy. A soft chime indicated an incoming transmission from Unity Station. Ambassador Walsh appeared on her screen, his expression serious but hopeful. Madam President, the Assembly has reached a unanimous decision regarding the Andromeda expedition, he reported. All member species have agreed to support the joint mission to establish contact with civilizations in the Andromeda galaxy. Carter smiled. The Andromeda expedition represented everything the new galactic order stood for: cooperation, exploration, and the peaceful expansion of knowledge and friendship across the universe. "When do we launch?" she asked. "The fleet departs in 6 months," Walsh replied. 50 ships representing 23 different species, carrying the best minds and technologies our civilizations can offer. Carter nodded. It was fitting that humanity's greatest adventure would be a joint effort with the species that had once cast them out. The exile that had been meant to contain humanity had instead taught them the value of working together across the vast darkness between the stars. The galaxy that had once feared humanity now looked to them for leadership in facing an uncertain future. But it wasn't leadership through domination or conquest. It was leadership through example, showing that even the greatest setbacks could become the foundation for something extraordinary. The exile was over, but the real journey was just beginning. 5 years after the formation of the Galactic Assembly, deep space monitoring stations at the edge of the galaxy began detecting something that would change everything. Dr. Patricia Moore sat in her laboratory aboard the research vessel Discovery, staring at sensor readings that defied explanation. "These signals are definitely artificial," she told her team of human and alien scientists. "But they're not coming from any known civilization. The transmission patterns are unlike anything in our databases." Her colleague, Zephyrian physicist Velen, manipulated the holographic display to show the signal's point of origin. "The source appears to be moving toward our galaxy at significant sublight speed. Whatever is sending these transmissions is very large and very advanced." Patricia felt a chill run down her spine. Humanity's expansion into the outer rim had revealed many wonders: new species, incredible technologies, and resources beyond imagination. But it had also hinted at darker things lurking in the spaces between galaxies. "Send this data to the Assembly immediately," she ordered, "and flag it as highest priority." On Unity Station, President Elizabeth Carter convened an emergency session of the Galactic Assembly's Security Council. Representatives from every major species gathered in the secure briefing room, their expressions growing more concerned as they reviewed the data from the outer rim. "The signals are definitely not random cosmic phenomena," reported Admiral Susan Wright, who had been studying the transmissions with her best analysts. "They show clear evidence of intelligence and purpose. More troubling, they appear to be scanning our galaxy systematically." Ambassador Carl Johnson leaned forward in his chair. "Scanning for what?" "Unknown," Wright admitted. "But the pattern suggests they're mapping our defensive positions, population centers, and resource locations. This looks like pre-invasion reconnaissance." Fleet Captain Monica Davis activated a 3-dimensional star map that showed the galaxy with the mysterious signals overlaid in red. The pattern was unmistakable. Whatever was out there was preparing for something big. "How long before they arrive?" asked Ambassador Kethvar of the Vorthak Republic. "Based on current speed and trajectory, approximately 18 months, Monica replied. "But that assumes they maintain their current approach. If they have faster-than-light capability, they could be here much sooner." President Carter stood and walked to the viewing port that looked out over Unity Station's bustling docks. Ships from dozens of species came and went constantly, carrying trade goods, passengers, and the peaceful commerce of a united galaxy. The thought of this peace being shattered by an unknown enemy was almost too much to bear. "What do we know about the old records?" she asked. "Did the original council ever encounter anything like this?" Elder historian Zixtal of the Zentari consulted his ancient data archives, the floating energy being pulsed with different colors as he accessed memories that went back thousands of years. "There are legends," Zixtal said slowly. Stories from the earliest days of galactic civilization. They speak of the Devourers, a machine intelligence that consumed entire galaxies before moving on to the next. Most scholars believed these were myths, cautionary tales to encourage cooperation among young civilizations. What happened to them in the legends? Carter asked. They were driven back by a great alliance of organic species, Zixtal replied. But the cost was enormous. Entire star systems were sacrificed to stop their advance. Even in victory, galactic civilization was set back thousands of years. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now serving as the Assembly's chief science advisor, had been analyzing the signal patterns with her team. Her findings were disturbing. The transmissions show clear signs of machine intelligence, she reported to the Security Council. But not like any artificial intelligence we understand. These signals suggest a collective consciousness spanning multiple vessels, possibly millions of individual units working in perfect coordination. Commander Ryan Mitchell, now head of Assembly Intelligence, added his own analysis. Our long-range sensors have detected massive objects at the signal source. Each one appears to be larger than our biggest space stations. If these are warships, we're facing a fleet that could overwhelm our defenses through sheer numbers. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Galactic Assembly had been so focused on internal reforms and peaceful exploration that they had never seriously considered the possibility of an external threat this massive. What are our options? President Carter asked. Admiral Wright activated another display showing the Assembly's current military strength. We have approximately 15,000 major warships distributed across member fleets, plus support vessels and defensive installations. It sounds impressive until you consider that we're talking about defending an entire galaxy. The old council never faced anything like this, added Ambassador Peter Walsh. Their military was designed for controlling subject species, not repelling invasion. We're dealing with a completely different type of threat. General Marcus Thompson, who had been quietly reviewing tactical assessments, spoke up from his position at the strategy table. Our technological advantages won't matter if we're outnumbered 1,000 to 1. We need to think differently about this problem. President Carter turned back to the assembled representatives. Recommendations? Full mobilization. Admiral Wright said immediately. Every member species needs to contribute ships, personnel, and resources. We also need to accelerate the development of new weapons and defensive systems. We should consider evacuating the Outer Rim colonies, suggested Ambassador Johnson. Focus our defenses on the core systems and buy time to prepare. No, Carter said firmly. We don't abandon our people. That's exactly the kind of thinking that led to humanity's exile in the first place. Dr. Rodriguez cleared her throat. There might be another option. During humanity's expansion into the Outer Rim, we discovered ruins of ancient civilizations. Some of them appear to have faced similar threats. If we can decipher their records, we might learn how they defended themselves. Elder historian Zixtal pulsed with sudden interest. The Veil archives. I had forgotten about them. Ancient data repositories hidden throughout the galaxy, supposedly containing the accumulated knowledge of extinct civilizations. How many of these archives have we found? Carter asked. Dozens, Elena replied, but most are damaged or encrypted beyond our current ability to decode. However, the approaching threat might give us the motivation to try harder. President Carter looked around the room at the faces of beings from across the galaxy. A year ago, many of these species had been enemies. Now they would have to work together to face a threat that could destroy them all. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings, she said formally, as of this moment, the Galactic Assembly is on full alert. All member species are to begin immediate military mobilization. Science teams will focus on deciphering the ancient archives. Intelligence services will gather every scrap of information about the approaching threat. She paused, looking each representative in the eye. Humanity spent 300 years learning that survival depends on cooperation and mutual support. Now we're all going to learn that lesson together. The irony was not lost on anyone in the room. The species that had once exiled humanity for being too dangerous were now depending on human experience with survival against impossible odds. The exile that had been meant to protect the galaxy from humanity had instead prepared humanity to protect the galaxy from something much worse. The real test of the new galactic order was about to begin. 12 months after the first signals were detected, the ancient enemy finally revealed itself. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the battleship New Horizon as the massive fleet of machine vessels emerged from hyperspace at the galaxy's edge. The sight was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. "How many ships are we looking at?" Jake asked his tactical officer, Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez. "Sensors are having trouble getting an accurate count," Amy replied, her voice tight with stress. "The formations extend beyond our scanning range. Estimated minimum 100,000 vessels." Jake stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The largest space battle in galactic history had involved maybe 1,000 ships on each side. This was something completely different. A machine. Intelligence that had converted entire star systems into warships. "Signal Assembly Command," Jake ordered. "Tell them the Devourers have arrived, and they're everything the legends warned us about." On Unity Station, President Carter watched the battle reports flood in from the Outer Rim. The machine intelligence, which had indeed turned out to be the legendary Devourers, was advancing on multiple fronts simultaneously. Their strategy was simple but effective. Overwhelm defenders with superior numbers while systematically consuming everything in their path. "Status report," she demanded from Admiral Wright. "We're holding at the Vanguard line for now," Wright replied, indicating positions on the strategic display. "But we're taking heavy casualties. The enemy ships are individually weaker than ours, but there are so many of them that it doesn't matter." The Vanguard line was a series of fortified systems that the Assembly had spent the past year preparing. Massive defensive stations, minefields, and coordinated fleet positions were designed to slow the enemy advance and buy time for the core worlds to complete their preparations. "What about the ancient archives?" Carter asked. "Have our science teams found anything useful?" Dr. Elena Rodriguez appeared on the communication screen from her research facility on New Terra. "We've made a breakthrough with the Veil archives. The ancient civilizations did face this exact enemy, and they found a way to defeat them." "How?" "The Devourers are a distributed intelligence," Elena explained. "Their individual ships are basically extensions of a central consciousness. If you can disrupt the quantum communication network that connects them, the fleet becomes just a collection of mindless machines." "That sounds too simple," Admiral Wright said skeptically. "It is simple in concept," Elena admitted. "The execution is incredibly complex. The ancient records describe something called a resonance cascade, a specific type of quantum interference that can collapse their entire network. But it requires precise timing across multiple star systems and technology we don't currently possess." President Carter studied the tactical display showing the slowly retreating Vanguard line. "What would we need to make this work?" "Three things," Elena replied. "First, we need to modify our quantum communication arrays to generate the resonance frequency. Second, we need to position them at specific points throughout the galaxy to create the cascade effect. Third, we need to keep the Devourers from realizing what we're doing until it's too late." General Marcus Thompson had been listening to the conversation from his command post on Fort Liberty. "The positioning requirement means we'll have to let them advance deeper into the galaxy. We can't create the cascade effect from the outer rim." "How deep?" Carter asked. "At least halfway to the core worlds," Marcus replied grimly. "We'll have to sacrifice dozens of systems to get them into position." The weight of that decision settled on everyone in the room. They were talking about abandoning billions of beings to an enemy that would either kill them or convert them into more machines. But the alternative was the complete destruction of galactic civilization. Fleet Captain Monica Davis commanded the evacuation operations in the Outer Rim systems. Her mixed-species fleet worked frantically to rescue civilians from worlds in the Devourer's path. The sight of entire populations fleeing their homes reminded her of the old stories about humanity's exile, but this was infinitely worse. "How many people have we evacuated from the Rigel sector?" she asked her operations officer, Commander Ben Parker. "Approximately 40 million so far," Ben replied. "But we're running out of transport capacity and the enemy advance is accelerating." Monica watched through the viewports as refugee ships fled past her flagship. Humans, Zephyrians, Vorthak, and dozens of other species crowded together in vessels never designed for such numbers. The new galactic order had created unprecedented prosperity and cooperation, but now that achievement was being tested by forces beyond their control. "Commander, signal the colony administrators that we're implementing Emergency Protocol 7, Monica ordered. Protocol 7 was the hardest decision any military commander could make, abandoning populated worlds to save the greater galaxy. But the ancient archives had been clear about one thing. The Devourers could not be stopped by conventional warfare. Only the Resonance Cascade offered hope. Engineer Patricia Moore worked with a team of scientists from 12 different species to modify the quantum communication arrays that connected the galaxy's civilizations. The delicate work required perfect coordination between technologies that had never been designed to work together. The resonance frequency has to be maintained within 0.001% accuracy, she explained to her team. Any variation, and the cascade will fail. Her Zephyrian colleague, Velen, manipulated the holographic schematics with graceful movements of his crystalline hands. The power requirements are enormous. Each array will need the output of an entire star to generate the necessary field strength. Then we build stellar collectors, Patricia replied without hesitation. We have the technology. The question is whether we have enough time. As the Devourers advanced deeper into the galaxy, they left behind a trail of empty star systems stripped of all organic life and useful materials. Their ships grew larger and more numerous as they consumed planets, moons, and asteroids to build more of themselves. But they had made one crucial mistake. They assumed that their current enemies were like all the others they had faced, disorganized, panicked, and focused only on immediate survival. They didn't understand that they were facing a civilization that had been forged in exile and had learned to plan for the impossible. Admiral Susan Wright coordinated the fighting retreat from her flagship Defiance. Her job was to make the withdrawal look real while secretly positioning forces for the final phase of the plan. It was the most complex military operation in galactic history, requiring split-second timing across dozens of star systems. "All units, begin Phase 3 withdrawal," she ordered. "Remember, this has to look like a genuine retreat. If the Devourers suspect what we're really doing, the entire plan fails." Human ships and their alien allies pulled back from defensive positions they had held for months, allowing the machine intelligence to advance exactly where the ancient archives said they needed to be. Every kilometer of territory surrendered brought the enemy closer to their ultimate defeat, but it also meant more worlds consumed by the mechanical swarm. The hardest part was maintaining the deception while millions of beings died or fled their homes. The Devourers had to believe they were winning until the moment the trap was sprung. In hidden facilities throughout the galaxy, the modified communication arrays powered up for their one-time use. The stellar collectors fed enormous amounts of energy into quantum field generators that would either save galactic civilization or destroy it completely. President Carter stood in the Assembly's war room, watching as the final pieces fell into place. In 6 hours, they would discover whether the wisdom of ancient civilizations could save them from the same fate that had befallen countless others. The species that had once cast out humanity for being too dangerous were now trusting human leadership to save them all from something infinitely more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The moment of truth arrived exactly on schedule. President Elizabeth Carter stood in the Assembly's command center as countdown timers reached 0 across the galaxy. For one terrifying second, nothing seemed to happen. Then space itself began to sing. The resonance cascade started as a barely detectable vibration in the quantum foam that underlied reality. Engineer Patricia Moore watched her instruments as the modified communication arrays generated precisely tuned interference patterns that spread outward at the speed of light. The ancient technology, rebuilt with modern understanding, worked exactly as the long-dead civilizations had promised. Cascade initiation confirmed, Patricia reported to the command center. Resonance is building within acceptable parameters. Throughout the galaxy, the vast Devourer fleet continued their methodical advance, unaware that their greatest strength was about to become their ultimate weakness. The quantum communication network that allowed millions of machine ships to act as a single intelligence suddenly found itself overwhelmed by harmonic frequencies it could not filter or block. Admiral Susan Wright watched from the bridge of her flagship as the first effects became visible. The perfectly coordinated Devourer formations began to waver, their precise movements becoming erratic and confused. "Enemy ships are breaking formation," reported her tactical officer, Commander Ryan Mitchell. "They appear to be losing coordination." "All units, begin the counterattack," Wright ordered. "Target the largest vessels first. We may never get another chance like this." The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Ships that had seemed invincible just hours before now drifted helplessly as their controlling intelligence fragmented into millions of disconnected pieces. Without the central consciousness to guide them, the individual Devourer vessels reverted to basic programming that made them easy targets for the combined assembly fleet. Captain Jake Morrison led his squadron in the final assault on the Devourer. Command vessel, a massive structure that had once been an entire moon converted into a mechanical brain. The ship had stopped moving, its surface lights flickering randomly as the resonance cascade tore apart its quantum neural networks. "This is for Kepler's hope," Jake said quietly as he fired the missiles that would finish the ancient enemy forever. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. When the light faded, the galaxy's greatest threat in recorded history had been reduced to scattered debris drifting in the cosmic wind. 6 months later, the cleanup operations were finally complete. Dr. Elena Rodriguez published her final report on the Devourer technology, which had provided incredible insights into artificial intelligence, quantum mechanics, and galactic engineering. The knowledge gained from studying their defeated enemy would advance galactic civilization by centuries. "The irony is remarkable," Elena told President Carter during their final briefing. "The Devourers were trying to eliminate organic life because they saw it as chaotic and inefficient. But it was exactly that chaos and diversity that allowed us to defeat them." President Carter nodded as she reviewed the casualty reports. The war had cost the galaxy dearly. Over 50 star systems destroyed, billions of beings dead or displaced, and an entire generation traumatized by the experience. But they had survived, and in doing so, had proven something important about the value of cooperation. "The memorial services will begin next week," Carter told Elena. "We'll honor every being who died fighting the machines, regardless of species or homeworld." The Galactic Memorial was built in the ruins of Rigel Prime, the first major world to fall to the Devourer advance. Unlike the monument on Earth, which celebrated human resilience, this memorial honored the sacrifice of all species who had stood together against extinction. Ambassador Peter Walsh spoke at the dedication ceremony. His words broadcast to every world in the galaxy. "We gather today not to celebrate victory, but to remember the price of freedom. The beings who died here, and in 50 other systems, gave their lives so that the galaxy could remain a place where diversity and cooperation could flourish." The audience included representatives from every species in the assembly, as well as newly discovered civilizations that had emerged from hiding after the Devourer threat was eliminated. The crisis had revealed that the galaxy contained far more intelligent life than anyone had imagined, most of it driven into concealment by fear of the machine intelligence. Fleet Captain Monica Davis commanded the new Exploration Corps, a joint organization dedicated to finding and protecting the scattered survivors of previous Devourer attacks. Her ships had already discovered dozens of hidden colonies and refugee populations that had been in hiding for centuries. "We estimate there are still thousands of isolated groups throughout the galaxy," Monica reported to the Assembly Council. "Some have been hiding so long they've forgotten why they went into concealment in the first place." The integration of these rediscovered civilizations became the Assembly's primary focus in the post-war period. Each group brought unique technologies, cultural perspectives, and survival strategies that enriched the galactic community. The diversity that the old council had tried to suppress became the foundation of a new golden age. General Marcus Thompson oversaw the transformation of the galaxy's military forces from a wartime army back to a peacekeeping organization. The lessons learned fighting the Devourers had revolutionized military thinking, but the real challenge was preventing the technology developed during the crisis from being misused. "The resonance cascade generators have been dismantled and their plans sealed," Marcus reported to President Carter. "Only the Assembly's Science Council will have access to the theoretical knowledge, and only in case of another existential threat." The decision to restrict the most dangerous technologies had been controversial, but necessary. The power to disrupt quantum networks could be used against organic brains as easily as artificial ones. Some knowledge was too dangerous to be widely shared, even among allies. Dr. Patricia Moore established the Institute for Galactic Defense, a research organization dedicated to understanding and preparing for future threats. Her work with the ancient archives had revealed that the Devourers were not unique. The galaxy had faced many existential crises over the millions of years of its history. "The pattern is clear," Patricia explained to her research team. "Every few million years, something emerges that threatens all life in the galaxy. Rogue artificial intelligences, extragalactic invaders, cosmic phenomena that destroy star systems. The species that survive are those that learn to work together." The Institute became a repository for dangerous knowledge and a training ground for the defenders of galactic civilization. Its graduates would spread throughout the galaxy, watching for signs of the next great threat and preparing responses that could save trillions of lives. President Carter stood in her office on New Terra, looking out at a galaxy that had been forever changed by recent events. The Devourer War had cost them dearly, but it had also proven the value of the system humanity had helped create after their return from exile. Ambassador Carl Johnson appeared on her communication screen with the final tally of new Assembly members. 47 additional species have requested membership in the past month, he reported. "The demonstration of our ability to defend against existential threats has convinced even the most isolationist civilizations to join us." Carter smiled. The galaxy that had once been divided between rulers and subjects was becoming a true community of equals. The crisis that could have destroyed them had instead made them stronger. "What's the status of the Earth Restoration Project?" she asked. "Phase 1 is complete," Carl replied. "The memorial is finished, and the first permanent settlements have been established. Earth will never be humanity's only home again, but it will always be where our story began." Carter nodded. Earth had become a symbol of something larger than human heritage. It represented the idea that no species should ever be forced to abandon their home, and that diversity was strength rather than weakness. The exile that had begun, with humanity being cast out for being too dangerous, had ended with humanity leading a galactic alliance capable of defeating the most dangerous threat in recorded history. The million worlds at humanity's back had become the foundation of a civilization that spanned the galaxy and beyond. As Carter prepared for her evening address to the Assembly, she reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. The species that had once feared humanity's aggressive nature now depended on that same determination to protect them from forces beyond imagination. The real victory was not defeating the Devourers, but proving that beings from across the galaxy could work together to face any challenge. The new dawn rising over a united galaxy was brighter than any sun, and it would shine for generations to come.